I was 10 the first time I heard the whispers behind the screen in my uncle's cinema. He owned a rundown movie house on the edge of town. One screen, tattered velvet seats, a faded marquee with letters that always seemed crooked no matter how he arranged them. It smelled like old popcorn and dust, but to me, it felt like magic. My parents had taken jobs abroad for the year, so I stayed with Uncle Sal. He wasn't warm exactly, but he let me help out in the theater, tearing tickets and sweeping the aisles, and that felt like something. The screen was huge, the kind that seemed to swallow you whole when you stood in front of it. Behind it was the storage area, boxes of reels, broken speakers, and forgotten props. No one ever went back there except Uncle Sal, and even he rarely did. One afternoon, while a Western played for a sleepy crowd of 6, I snuck behind the screen. I wasn't supposed to, but I was curious. It was darker than I expected. The kind of dark that makes your skin feel too thin. As I stepped around a stack of metal cans, I heard it. Soft murmuring, like someone talking, low and steady, just around the corner. I froze. My first instinct was to bolt, but the whisper had something in it that hooked me. It didn't sound threatening, it sounded tired, lonely. I backed out and told Uncle Sal. He looked at me a long time before saying, "Probably just rats. Don't go back there." Then he turned away and started counting bills from the register. That night I couldn't sleep. My room was above the theater, and I swore I could hear that same low voice coming up through the floorboards. The next day, I asked Sal who used to run the place before him. He didn't answer, just mumbled something about not digging into what didn't concern me. Of course, I went back behind the screen. This time I brought a flashlight. I moved slower. The murmur came again, clearer now, though the words still didn't make sense. I shone the light toward the sound and spotted an old dressing mirror, cracked at the corners, leaning against the wall. It was angled just right so it caught my reflection, and behind me, a figure. I turned around fast. No one. When I looked back at the mirror, it was gone too. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of film reels. The noise must have drawn Sal, because a moment later he was there grabbing my arm. "You don't ever go behind there again," he snapped. "Do you understand?" That was the first time I ever heard him raise his voice. His hand shook when he let go of me. The next few days he barely spoke to me. I tried to forget what I'd seen, told myself it was imagination, a trick of shadows. Then one night, the projector jammed during the late show. Sal went up to fix it, leaving me in the theater alone. The audience, just 3 people, grumbled but waited. I stood near the front, watching the frozen frame on the screen. That's when I heard it again. The whisper. This time it said my aim. I turned slowly. The screen was glowing faintly, though the projector was off. Shapes moved behind it, not shadows, but forms. I stepped closer, my feet making no sound on the sticky floor. A pale hand pushed against the fabric from the other side, fingers long and trembling. I screamed and ran up to the booth. Sal locked the projector room door behind us and didn't let me out for an hour. He finally told me the truth. Decades ago, before he bought the place, the theater had been run by his older brother, my great-uncle Elias. A gifted man, but unstable. During the final showing of a silent film he'd produced himself, Elias had walked behind the screen and never came out, vanished in front of a dozen witnesses. They thought he'd run off, Sal said. But I know better. He found a way into the picture. I didn't believe him. Not really. Not until he showed me the last frame of Elias's movie, still stored in a tin under the counter. It was black and white, grainy, but there, standing behind the film's heroine, half shrouded in shadow, was a man in a tattered suit with hollow eyes. Elias. That was the last time I went behind the screen. We stopped using that area entirely. Covered it with heavy curtains, padlocked the storage door. Years later, after Uncle Sal died, I inherited the place. Most days it sits empty, but I keep it open. I fix the seats, I change the marquee. I still play old movies, sometimes even Elias's last one. And every now and then when the reels skip and the shadows move wrong, I hear it. The whisper. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. I grew up on the second floor of an old brick building in the neighborhood of Marielas, where every other apartment housed some relative of mine. Birthdays were more like community events than private affairs. So when my younger sister Rena turned 11, it was no surprise that nearly everyone from our street showed up at Aunt Zeeny's unit down on the ground floor, where she had a little backyard that opened onto a shared garden. That day had the usual buzz: aluminum trays filled with sweet buns, fried cassava, and sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves. Kids darting around, yelling over music blaring from someone's borrowed speaker. The grown-ups stayed in plastic chairs sipping tea and telling stories that always started with "back in my day." Our cousin Jarell, who was a year older than me, suggested we play seek and freeze, a version of hide and seek we made up where the hiders had to stay perfectly still if found, or they'd be frozen until someone tagged them free. We were maybe 6 kids all around the same age, racing through the halls and stairwells like a swarm of bees. Aunt Zeeny's apartment became the boundary line. The rules were simple. Anywhere was fair game except the upstairs neighbor's unit and the front lobby. I picked the storage room behind Aunt Zeeny's kitchen. Nobody liked going in there. It used to be her husband's workspace before he passed away, full of dusty things, long-forgotten projects, and strange tools nobody knew how to use. She had turned most of it into a makeshift studio for her tailoring jobs with dress forms lined up like mannequins in a row, most of them half-dressed in unfinished clothes. The place gave me the creeps, but that was also what made it perfect. I wrapped myself in a patterned tablecloth from a box of fabric scraps and stood still in the corner, next to one of the headless dress forms. I even tilted my head down like the others so I'd blend in. The stillness made my legs ache fast and my breath kept catching in my throat, but I was proud of my spot. Somewhere in the distance I heard giggles and running feet, voices calling names. Then it went quiet. Too quiet. Time started feeling thick, like I was frozen for real. I started wondering if they'd forgotten me, or worse, if they weren't even playing anymore. I nearly broke character to check, but just then, I caught movement near the doorway. I held still. Someone else entered. I assumed it was one of the older kids coming to fake me out. But they didn't say anything. No teasing, no laughing. Just slow, careful steps, and the door closing with a soft click. I waited for the light to come on, but it stayed dim. They didn't call my name, they didn't say "found you." Just silence. Then a sound I can still remember perfectly. A slow, uneven breath. Not mine. I stayed frozen, eyes down, body still. But every hair on my arm stood up. Whoever was in the room moved toward the dress forms. I heard something brush against the fabric beside me. Something too soft to be an arm, too unsteady to be a mannequin. I wanted to look. I didn't. Seconds passed like hours. I could smell something. Stale sweat, or maybe old clothes soaked in dampness. It was not the smell of anyone at the party. It wasn't a smell I knew. I couldn't take it anymore. I broke my stance and glanced sideways. Someone was crouched beside the opposite wall under a blanket of some kind. One of Aunt Zeeny's unfinished projects, maybe. Except, their feet were bare. Not just bare, but caked in grime. Their hands pressed against the floor were trembling. I couldn't see their face, but their breathing quickened when I moved. I bolted, didn't stop until I was outside yelling for my uncle. I think I said something like, "There's someone in the room." Everyone paused. Even the music cut off. My uncle jumped up without a word. He and 2 of my older cousins rushed inside. I followed, shaky-legged and gasping. But when we got to the room, it was empty. The fabric lay in a pile. The door was still closed. The corner was just a corner again. They searched everywhere, even behind the shelf that never moved. Nothing. I kept repeating what I saw. Those feet, those hands, that breath. The adults took it seriously enough. My uncle called the building guard, and soon 2 officers came to check. They asked questions, made notes, tried not to scare anyone. But they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no missing people, nothing stolen. I felt like I was shrinking with every adult glance. They weren't mocking me, not exactly, but I could see it on their faces, that slight, polite doubt. That tilt of the head people use when talking to a kid about monsters under. Later that night, I sat on the curb while the party wound down. Rena came over with a leftover bun and asked if I'd imagined it all. I told her no. I told her I knew what I saw, what I felt, and I still do. Aunt Zini now locks that room when there are visitors. She never said why, and I never went back in there again, not even when she asked me to help carry something years later. There are things you don't forget. The way your skin recognizes a presence before your brain catches up. The sound of breath that isn't yours. I never learned who it was. Maybe someone snuck in from the garden. Maybe someone never left in the first place, but whoever it was, they were real. I don't need proof. I already know the truth. It was during the summer I turned 13, back when my cousins and I spent most of our break at my Uncle Rafi's property in the outskirts of a small town called Sonora Falls. It wasn't really a town, more like a handful of families scattered across dry hills and old ranch land. Uncle Rafi lived in an old print shop he'd converted into a house. The building still had its original concrete floors, long hallways, and even one giant back room where the printing presses used to be. He'd turned that part into a studio, where he worked on weird sculptures and projects made from salvaged parts. It smelled like rust and motor oil, and the walls were lined with mannequins, tools, and scraps. My cousins and I called it the workshop, and it was both the coolest and creepiest place we knew. That summer, our family decided to throw a big cookout at Uncle Rafi's for my cousin Leo's birthday. He was turning 14 and obsessed with spy movies, so the theme was full-on secret agent. Even the games we played that day were over the top. Mission-based hide-and-seek, capture the briefcase, all that. There were about 10 of us, mostly cousins and friends from neighboring farms. I was part of Leo's team, and we'd scoped out the best hiding spots all over the property, especially in the workshop. The rules were that you could hide anywhere except Uncle Rafi's sleeping loft and the tool shed. The rest of the building was fair game, which meant the workshop was prime territory. You could slip between statues, crawl under benches, or even wedge yourself behind crates filled with broken machine parts. Late in the afternoon, during one of the last rounds of the game, I decided to pull off a classic fake-out. I grabbed 2 painter's tarps from a storage bin near the hallway, one to throw over myself while hiding behind a stack of pallets, and one to drape over a mannequin in the middle of the room. The mannequins were already weird. Some were missing heads, others had wires instead of limbs. I figured if someone pulled off the tarp expecting me and got nothing but fiberglass, it'd be a great scare. I set up the decoy, tucked myself behind the pallets, and threw the other tarp over my head. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that made you suddenly aware of every creak in your bones and every rustle of breath. I sat there, still and alert, waiting for footsteps, voices, anything. After maybe 15 minutes, I heard shouting in the distance, laughter, and feet pounding across the floor upstairs. Someone had definitely been found and was probably running for the base zone, which we'd marked with a plastic cone on the front patio. Then everything went silent again. I stayed hidden, hoping someone would walk in and get spooked by the dummy I'd set up, but no one came. After a while, my knees started aching and the sweat under the tarp made me itchy. I was just about to give up when I heard Leo's voice call my name from the hallway, telling me the game was over and food was ready outside. Relieved, I tossed the tarp aside and rushed upstairs. The scent of grilled chicken and smoked corn hit me before I even reached the patio. Plates were already being passed around. I got caught up in a long conversation with my aunt and completely forgot about the tarps I'd left down in the workshop, especially the one I'd draped over the mannequin. It wasn't until later, after I'd gone inside to use the bathroom, that I remembered. Not wanting to get chewed out by Uncle Rafi for leaving stuff in his workspace, I headed back down to clean up. The lights in the workshop were on motion sensors, so the space lit up in soft yellow as I entered. At first glance, everything looked fine. Then I noticed something strange. The tarp I'd placed over the mannequin wasn't where I left it. It wasn't on the center mannequin at all. It was over something in the corner, something that looked different, seated. There weren't any seated mannequins in the workshop. They were all standing, mounted on poles or lying on shelves. I stepped closer, thinking maybe someone had moved it for a prank. But as I neared the figure, I froze. It moved. I could hear it breathing. Short, uneven breaths. There was a bitter, unwashed smell in the air. Something that hadn't been there before. Not motor oil, not paint. Something human. Something sour. I forced a nervous laugh. Okay. Who is that? No response. My stomach twisted. I glanced down, expecting to see boots or sneakers and be done with it. Just another cousin hiding for fun. But what I saw were bare feet, calloused, dirty. Definitely not anyone from the party. And the skin was darker than anyone in our family. I backed up slowly at first. Then I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I burst through the back door onto the patio, nearly knocking over a tray of drinks. I found Uncle Rafi, out of breath, and panicked and told him someone was in the workshop, someone we didn't know. The mood flipped instantly. He didn't even ask questions. He grabbed his phone and called the police while a few of the older cousins went inside to check. I followed, heart pounding. But when we got to the workshop, the tarp was on the floor. The chair was empty. Whoever had been there was gone. I kept repeating what I'd seen. The feet, the movement, the breathing. I wasn't making it up. Everyone searched the entire property, upstairs, downstairs, outside. Nothing. The cops arrived soon after and it became a whole scene. Flashlights, questions. They checked every corner of the place, but they didn't find anyone. No sign of a break-in. But outside, near the garage wall, they found prints in the dirt. Bare footprints leading away from the house. Later, we realized the side door to the workshop had been left propped open. With people coming in and out all day, it would have been easy for someone to slip in, a stranger, a drifter. Who knows? Maybe they just wanted shelter for a while. Maybe more. We'll never know. I didn't sleep well that night. I shared a room with Leo and kept staring at the window until sunrise. That was the last time I ever hid in the workshop. Even now I get tense walking into any place that smells like dust and metal. I don't blame Uncle Rafi, but I never went back that summer, or any summer after. Some memories feel like they wait in basements and back rooms. You don't visit them, they visit you.